Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Another month has gone and it is time to talk about all of the books that I have read in March. Before we get into the individual reviews, however, I want to give you a couple of stats that have to do with my goal to reduce my TBR to 0. So every month I give you a couple of numbers that are important for that goal. So at the beginning of March, my TBR is set at 55 books, and let's see whether I could bring that number down in March. So the first number that is important here is the amount of books that I have read in March, and that was 10 books. However, one of these books is a reread, which means that it did not reduce my TBR. The next important number is the books that I have bought in March, and that is 4. However, one of those was a gift, and so I only really bought 3 and got 1 as a gift, but 4 new books moved on to my TBR because of that. And the last important number is how many books I have borrowed, and that was 4 books as well. Because I'm on vacation, I did take a trip to the library. I couldn't resist, so this is the end result of that, basically. So if we take 10 books read, 1 reread, 4 books bought, and 4 books borrowed, we have reduced our TBR by the end of March by 1 book. 1 book. Which is a little bit sad. I was hoping to reduce it more. But so at the end of March, my TBR is sitting at 54 books. Even though I didn't reduce my TBR a ton, this was still my most successful reading month numbers-wise because I read 10 books. So let's get into the reviews. The first book I finished in March was for my series, a reading vlog. And that was Annihilation, the first book in the Southern Reach trilogy. In this book, we are following a group of women scientists who enter the mysterious Area X that they don't really have a lot of information about on a secret expedition. And they are supposed to figure out what the hell is going on in Area X. I really enjoyed this book. It is quite short. I would say it is kind of sci-fi horror because we do have our characters in a setting that is very dangerous and defies our rules of the world. So whatever happens, you know, there is tons of possibilities. And I really enjoyed that first book. I read it on a weekend, and I think this is a book that is supposed to be read in one sitting, basically. And so I gave it 4 stars. Then the next book I finished was my audiobook, We Deserve Monuments by Jess Hammonds. In this book, we are following a young girl who grew up in a city but is now moving back to a small town because her grandmother is dying of cancer and her family decides to live with her to kind of get a connection again. And she is at first very horrified that she is supposed to spend her last year of school in this small town, but then realizes that there is still a lot of opportunities to get to know people better and to figure out what life is all about. And I love this book. It's really great. If you read YA, I would highly recommend this. I gave it 5 stars. Then the next book I finished was my reread of A Little Nothing by Marisa Silver. This is one of the 4 books I reread from 2017 because I could not remember what this book was about. In this one, we are following a family. We have a couple who are already quite old, but they weren't able to conceive a child, but then they do get a daughter, but this daughter is disabled. She is born very, very small. And this is kind of like a dark fairy tale, so not a lot of this makes sense, but we see this character becoming more and more monstrous the more she is hurt. And there is some problematic aspects to this for sure, because it does rely so much on these old fairy tale tropes, but I still really enjoyed it on reread. I think it has just this very interesting feeling to it, so I still gave it 4.5 stars. Next up, I finished reading Authority, book 2 in the Southern Reach trilogy, so the sequel to Annihilation. And in this one, we are following a different character who is now to be the director of the Southern Reach, the agency that is supposed to look after Area X. And with this new character, we're trying to figure out the secrets of this agency, while basically everyone is trying to keep that person from finding out these secrets. And this is definitely the weakest one in the trilogy, but I still really enjoyed it and gave it 4 stars as well. Then the next book I finished is a horror novella. It was What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is The Fall of the House of Usher retelling, where we are following a former soldier, Alex, and they are going to their friend's house because they received a letter that the friend is very sick. And while there, things are very, very creepy and weird. The rabbits don't do what rabbits are supposed to do, and there is mushrooms everywhere. I really enjoyed this one. It's a very fast, quick, short read. I think because I read The Fall of the House of Usher last year in preparation for the TV show, which I then never watched, it felt a little bit too predictable to me. Like, I knew where the story was going the whole time, so that was a little bit sad. But apart from that, it was a fun time, and I do just really like T. Kingfisher's books, so I gave it 4 stars. Then I finished my next audiobook and the start to a new series that I want to read this year, and that is The Ninth Reign, the first book in the Winnowing Flame series by Jen Williams. In this one, we do have a bit of a complex setup, but basically we have a world where there's 2 types of people. There is humans and there is Abhorrents. And Abhorrents are kind of a mix between elves and vampires. They live very, very long lives, and in the past they had this tree god who gave them sap, and that kept them alive and healthy. It helped them heal wounds and stuff like that. But there is a kind of an alien force that is trying to invade this world in regular intervals, and the Abhorrents are the ones who have always fought off this alien force. But the last time they came, they actually destroyed the tree god, and now the Abhorrents don't have the sap anymore. And so for a time, they figured out that drinking human blood gave them strength as well, but that came with a terrible disease known as the Crimson Flux. So now most of the Abhorrents are dead, but there are a couple still surviving, and there might be another attack from the alien race that could happen soon. We're following multiple characters in this world. Mostly we have a human woman who's already a little bit older, and she is researching the kind of remains of this alien race that stayed after they lost their battles and that are slowly kind of poisoning the world. And she's trying to do research on that with the help of an Abhorrent who is basically like a big cat. He is like not friendly, very like entitled, but you still kind of root for him and like him. So this first book was amazing. I can't wait to read the rest of the series, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Then the next book I finished was Acceptance, which is book 3 in the Southern Reach trilogy. So with that, I finished off this series. And in Acceptance, we're then following multiple characters, some of which we have seen before, some of which are quite new to us. And in this one, we actually do kind of get some answers, even though I wouldn't expect too much from that, because there's still a lot that we do not know about this world and why Area X exists. But I thought it was a fantastic conclusion. It was actually my favorite book of the trilogy, and I gave it 4.5 stars. The reason for that is that we get one particular POV that is set pre-Area X, and the like slow dread we feel with this POV and just empathizing with this person who is just trying their best, but we know what's gonna happen. It was really sad and great at the same time. I really loved the last book. Then I finished reading a book that I had borrowed from my mum so many years ago, like I can't even remember, before the pandemic, way before the pandemic. And that was Matters of Choice by Noah Gordon. This is a historical fiction. It's also the third book in a trilogy where we follow the Cole family. The first book you might have heard about. It's called The Physician in English, I think, and it had a movie as well, like many years ago. And that one was set during the Middle Ages. Then the second book is set in the US during the settlers' time, I think. And then this one is actually not historical fiction because it is set in the 80s and 90s and it was written in the 90s, but now it still feels like historical fiction. And in this last book we are following a female doctor for the first time, and she invites us basically to look at the healthcare system of the US in the 90s, criticizing it quite a bit. And then also one big theme of this book is abortion and abortion rights. And reading this book while knowing that it has not improved but has gotten much worse since this book was written was very, very hard. It was very hard to read. And while I definitely gained some things from it, I wouldn't say that the story, the plot of this was very good. There were some things I had issues with when it comes to how it dealt with the problem just in the plot, basically. But overall, I gave it 3.5 stars. It's not a book that I would recommend nowadays, but if you want to be reminded of what the 90s were like, then you can check out this book. Then I let my cat choose a book, and that book was Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi. This one I got during our little secret Santa over on the Discord channel of Yolene. Her channel is Yolene Reads. And yeah, I got this book. I was very excited about it because I read White is for Witching last year, and so I wanted to continue on my Helen Oyeyemi journey. And this was definitely something. In this book, we are following a family of 3 women. We have the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter. And what we look at mostly is the story of the mother, because at the beginning of the book, the daughter does something very dramatic, very dangerous. And to find out why she did it, her mother is basically forcing her into this bargain that she will tell her about her own childhood, and then her daughter will tell her why she did that dangerous thing and who put her up to it. And the strange thing about this family is that they are from a country that doesn't seem to exist. Like most other countries don't acknowledge that this country exists. And the way it is portrayed in here is that they just decided not to have any foreign relations with any other countries, so most of them just forget that they're there. This was a very interesting read. It is a great look at poverty and the exploitation of poor people and how poor people have to stay poor for rich people to stay rich and stuff like that. It also is a look at immigration, but for me personally, the whole wealth theme was much stronger. Like that was the part that I kind of thought was very, very interesting in here. And yeah, the way that even when rich people help you, they're not doing it for you, and there is like very clear restrictions on how you can receive that help and stuff like that. So really, really enjoyed this, gave it 4 stars. But Helen Oyeyemi is definitely not for everyone. Her writing style is interesting, to say the least. Then I finished another little horror novella, the sequel to What Moves the Dead, and that is What Feasts at Night by T. Kingfisher. This one again, we are following Alex on another adventure, and this time they are going back to a hut that they own in the woods, and they find their caretaker dead, like the caretaker of the hut. And there is a lot of mythology in this one, which I really enjoyed. I actually liked this one a little bit better than the first book. I think that also a little bit more of T. Kingfisher's humor was in the second book, and that was missing for me in the first book a little bit. So I really liked this one. I had a great time reading it, and I gave it 4 stars. And that, my friends, is all the books that I managed to finish in March, even though I did read some more, but I just didn't finish the books in time for the end of the month, so you will hear about those in April. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like or a nice comment. If you did, let me know what your favorite book of March was, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye!